Today you will live through a day as a medieval alchemist, a person seeking ways to change the very nature of matter. You'll discover how the pursuit of immortality led to the invention of gunpowder and changed the history of warfare forever. You'll become acquainted with ancient recipes brought from fallen Byzantium and distant Arab lands. You'll understand why the Church simultaneously supported and persecuted alchemists, and you'll see how the medieval laboratory became the cradle of modern science. Welcome to Florence, mid-15th century, a time when science and mysticism are not yet separated, and the boundaries of possibility are only beginning to be explored. You'll hear the story of how the search for the philosopher's stone led to the discovery of acids that changed the world, how dreams of turning lead into gold laid the foundation for chemistry, how legends of the elixir of immortality gave birth to modern medicine, and how mysterious symbols and encrypted texts preserved knowledge that centuries later would become the heritage of all humanity. If you like what we create, leave a like and subscribe. Write in the comments where you're listening from. We're interested to know who travels with us through the centuries. Ready to hear the silence of a medieval laboratory where candles cast shadows on ancient texts? To live through a day as someone whose work will change the future? Close your eyes. The journey begins. The first rays of sunlight break through the narrow window, and you open your eyes. You are an alchemist, a person who has dedicated your life to studying nature's secrets and searching for ways to transform matter. Your day begins early, long before the city fully awakens. You live and work in a small space on the upper floor of a stone building in the center of Florence. This is simultaneously your laboratory, workshop, and home. In the corner stands a narrow bed where you sleep only a few hours per day because an alchemist's work demands constant attention. Some processes cannot be left unattended. They continue day and night, and you need to check regularly that everything is in order. The air in the room smells of herbs, smoke from the furnace and something metallic, the scent of mercury and other minerals you work with. For most people, these smells would seem strange or unpleasant, but for you they have long become familiar, almost homely. You rise from bed and first thing approach the furnace. It's called an athanor, and it's the main tool of any alchemist. The athanor is a large brick furnace about as tall as a person. Its special feature is that it can burn for several days straight, maintaining constant temperature, almost without your intervention. Yesterday evening you loaded it with wooden coals, and now inside there's still an even heat glowing. On top of the furnace sits a large glass vessel with a curved tube. Inside, liquid slowly boils, gradually purifying. This process has been going for 2 days already. Your profession is one of the most unusual in the medieval world. An alchemist is not a simple craftsman or merchant. You're a scientist, a researcher, a person trying to understand how the world works and whether one substance can be transformed into another. Society treats alchemists differently. Rich people respect you and are willing to pay for your services because you can do what others cannot: create medicines, purify metals, obtain rare dyes. Simple townsfolk are wary of your work, considering it too mysterious. The church is cautious because some alchemists in the past promised to create gold from ordinary lead, and the church called this deception and sin. But you're not engaged in fraud, but real science, studying the properties of substances, trying to purify them, combine them, obtain something new. You have a patron, a wealthy person who gives you money for your work. This is common practice for scientists and artists in the 15th century. Supporting an alchemist is prestigious. It shows that a person is educated and interested in science. But the patron doesn't simply give money out of kindness. He expects results. He needs medicines for treating diseases, new ways to purify gold and silver for jewelers, bright dyes for fabrics. Sometimes he asks you to consult physicians or help artists with preparing paints. You depend on his generosity, and this means you must constantly work, show progress, Prove your usefulness. Your working day is filled with the most varied tasks. Sometimes you spend hours standing by the furnace, watching as liquid slowly boils in a glass vessel, how it changes color, how drop by drop the purified essence collects. Other days you sit at the table and grind minerals into fine powder, monotonous work that can take an entire day, but without it many medicines and paints cannot be prepared. Often you need to go down to the market to buy herbs, minerals, oils, everything necessary for experiments. All the spice merchants, apothecaries, metal traders, they know you and set aside rare things for you that are brought from distant lands. Sometimes you're summoned to the patron's palace, and you must explain to him what you're working on, show results, answer questions. This is always a bit nerve-wracking because you need to speak in simple language about complex things and not look like a charlatan. Imagine what volume of knowledge is needed for this profession. You must understand the properties of dozens of herbs and know which herb helps which disease. You must understand how metals behave when heated, which can be combined and which cannot. You must know how to handle poisonous substances like mercury and arsenic without poisoning yourself. You must know how to properly heat, cool, mix, separate substances. All this knowledge doesn't come from books. Books on alchemy are often written in vague language and full of symbols that need to be deciphered. The main training happens through practice, through years of work beside a teacher, through your own experiments, mistakes, and successes. You approach the work table. Here lies a thick book in leather binding, your personal journal where you record all experiments. Each time you try a new recipe or method, you note which substances you took, how long you heated them, what resulted. This is very important because if an experiment succeeded, you need to remember exactly how to repeat it.
And if it failed, you need to understand what went wrong.
Many entries are made with special signs. For example, a circle with a dot inside means gold, a crescent means silver, a cross in a circle means copper. These aren't magical symbols, but simply abbreviations to write faster, and so outsiders can't easily read your secrets. On the table also stand scales, very precise, copper with 2 pans. Weighing is one of the most important operations in alchemy. You need to know exactly how much of each substance you're taking, because even a small error can ruin the entire process. Next to the scales lie small weights of different masses, from tiny ones weighing like a grain to large ones weighing several ounces. Here also are various instruments: copper tongs for taking hot vessels, long glass rods for stirring liquids, small spoons for measuring powders, a mortar and pestle for grinding. But an alchemist's work is not only the laboratory. You spend significant time outside these walls. You visit artists and help them prepare paints. Renaissance artists cannot work without alchemists because only you know how to get bright blue paint from grey stone, how to make paint for the lips of saints in frescoes from red mineral. You visit apothecaries and teach them how to properly prepare complex medicines. You consult jewelers when they need to purify gold from impurities or make a special alloy for ornaments. You sometimes communicate with physicians, explaining to them the properties of new medicines you've created. All this makes you an important part of city life, a person whose knowledge many need. And here's what's striking in an alchemist's life: constant balancing between science and survival. On one hand, you're driven by genuine interest in how the world works. You want to understand why some substances dissolve in water and others don't, why mercury is a liquid metal, whether a substance can be purified so much it becomes completely pure. These questions occupy your mind constantly. But on the other hand, you need to eat, pay for housing, buy expensive materials for work. And that means you need to do what people pay for: medicines, paints, consultations. Sometimes you have to postpone an interesting experiment to fulfill the patron's order. This is part of the profession. Dangers also accompany you constantly. Some substances you work with are poisonous. Mercury vapors, if inhaled too long, cause trembling hands and memory problems. Arsenic powder, if accidentally entering the mouth, can kill.
Strong acids burn through skin.
Therefore, you're always careful, always ventilate the room, always wash your hands after working with dangerous substances. Glass vessels can crack from uneven heating, and then hot liquid sprays around the laboratory. The furnace can overheat, and the substance inside will boil so violently it creates pressure and explodes the vessel. All this has happened to you or to other alchemists, you know. Each scar on your hand is a reminder that this work requires not only mind, but caution. Now the sun has risen higher, and light fills the laboratory. You check all vessels, all processes currently underway. In one corner hang bundles of drying herbs, rosemary, lavender, sage. In another corner stand clay pots with minerals, red cinnabar powder, yellow sulfur, white vitriol. On shelves are lined up dozens of glass bottles and vials with various liquids and powders, each labeled. This is your treasury, the result of many years of work and accumulating knowledge. Today, an ordinary but busy day awaits you. In the morning, you need to finish the distillation and pour the ready liquid into a clean vial. And go down to the market for fresh herbs and possibly for a new glass retort, because the old one cracked last week. After lunch, you'll need to visit the artist who ordered special red paint for a fresco. Evening, return to the laboratory and begin a new experiment you've been planning for several days. An alchemist's work never ends. Each day brings new tasks, new questions, new small discoveries. You chose this life many years ago when as a boy you saw a wandering alchemist turn murky water into clear liquid without smell, and understood you wanted to unravel nature's secrets. Now you're not simply earning a living, you're expanding the boundaries of human knowledge, helping people, creating what didn't exist before. You descend the narrow stone staircase and exit onto the street. Florence awakens. The morning air is fresh and cool, smelling of smoke from furnaces where bakers have already begun work, and wet stone pavement. The streets are narrow. Buildings stand so close to each other that upper floors almost touch, and between them are strung ropes with drying laundry. You hear the ringing of hammers from forges, voices of merchants beginning to lay out goods on stalls, barking dogs, the clatter of horse hooves on stones. This is a city that never completely sleeps. Here, someone is always working, trading, creating something new. Florence in the mid-15th century is one of the richest and most influential cities, not only of Italy, but of all Europe. About 60,000 people live here, making the city large by the standards of that time. Florence's wealth is built on several foundations. First, production of woolen fabrics. Florentine cloth is considered the best in Europe, bought by kings and nobility across the continent. Second foundation, banking. Florentine bankers lend money to rulers of different countries, finance trade expeditions, exchange currencies. The florin, Florence's gold coin, is accepted everywhere from London to Constantinople. Third foundation, trade. Florentine merchants carry wool from England, spices from Asia, silk from China, dyes from North Africa. But the city is famous not only for wealth. Florence has become a center where art, science, philosophy flourish. Here work the greatest artists, sculptors, architects. Their works decorate churches, palaces, squares. The cathedral dome rising above the city is considered an engineering marvel. No one believed such an enormous dome could be built without scaffolding supporting it from below, but the architect found a way. Here live philosophers who study ancient Greek texts and try to understand how the wisdom of antiquity can enrich the modern world. And here work scientists like you investigating the nature of things. Why did Florence specifically become such a center? The reason is that here are wealthy people willing to spend money not only on luxury for themselves, but also on supporting art and science. Supporting an artist, alchemist, philosopher, this is prestigious. It shows that a person is not simply rich but educated, understands the value of beauty and knowledge. Patrons compete with each other, who will build a more beautiful palace, who will commission a more impressive fresco, who will attract a more famous scientist. This competition creates an amazing atmosphere where talent is valued and receives support. You walk along the street toward the market. Along the way, you meet a familiar face, the apothecary's assistant carrying a basket of herbs. You nod to each other. Further, you see a group of apprentices from an artist's workshop. They're hurrying somewhere with wooden boards and sacks, probably carrying materials for new work. You pass a jeweler's shop, where behind the window a master already sits, working on a delicate gold ornament under a magnifying glass. Florence is a city of craftsmen, and all are connected by invisible threads.
You, as an alchemist, are part of this network.
You give artists paints, jewelers, knowledge about purifying metals, apothecaries, medicine recipes. They in turn share information with you, bring new orders, tell what's happening in the city. But there's another side to an alchemist's work, the one spoken of in whispers, with bated breath, with a mixture of fear and admiration. These are the legends and myths that have surrounded your profession for centuries. Simple people believe that alchemists possess secret knowledge, can work miracles, seek what seems impossible. And partly, they're right. Alchemy indeed has great goals that inspire generations of researchers, even if these goals have not yet been achieved. The first of these goals is the Philosopher's Stone. This is not simply a stone, but a substance that, according to legend, can turn ordinary metals into gold. Imagine, take a piece of lead, add a grain of the Philosopher's Stone, and the lead becomes pure gold. Sounds like a fairy tale, but many alchemists of the past believed in this possibility and dedicated their lives to searching for such a substance. Some claimed they found it, but no one could convincingly prove it. The church banned attempts to create gold, calling it deception and sin, but the legend lives on. You, as a true scientist, understand that transforming one metal into another, if possible at all, requires understanding the deepest nature of matter, which humanity doesn't yet possess. But the very idea is fascinating. What if metals truly can be changed? What if there exists a key to this transformation? The second great goal is the elixir of immortality. This is a substance that can stop aging and give a person eternal life. Legends tell of ancient alchemists who allegedly created such an elixir and live for centuries, moving from country to country under different names. Of course, you're skeptical of these stories. All people age and die. This is a law of nature. But what if aging can be slowed? What if there exists a substance that extends life not to infinity, but say by 10 or 20 years? This no longer seems completely impossible. You know that some herbs and minerals truly strengthen health, help the body better cope with diseases. Perhaps a combination of the right substances purified to perfection could indeed have such an effect. And you, like many other alchemists, sometimes experiment in this direction, knowing that even if you don't find immortality, you might create a medicine that helps people live longer and healthier. The third goal is panacea, a universal medicine for all diseases. In a world where medicine is still very imperfect, where people die from diseases that seem mysterious and incurable, the idea of a medicine capable of curing anything looks like a dream. Alchemists believe that if a substance is purified to absolute purity, obtaining its quintessence, the fifth essence, free from all impurities, then such a substance will possess incredible healing power.
You work on this constantly.
Each distillation, each attempt to purify an herbal extract or mineral, this is a step towards seeking a more perfect medicine. These three goals, the Philosopher's Stone, the elixir of immortality, and panacea, are surrounded by many myths and legends. They tell of the mysterious Count of Saint-Germain, who appears at various European courts and never ages. Of Nicolas Flamel, a Parisian scribe who allegedly found an ancient book with alchemy secrets and created the Philosopher's Stone. Of ancient Egyptian priests who possessed knowledge lost after their civilization fell. You've heard all these stories, read about them in old manuscripts. Part of them is certainly fiction, exaggeration, wishful thinking presented as reality. But what if some legends contain a grain of truth? What if someone truly came close to these great discoveries, but the knowledge was lost? Imagine how these legends influence society's perception of alchemy. For some, alchemists are almost wizards, people standing on the boundary between the ordinary world and the world of mysteries. For others, charlatans promising the impossible and deceiving trusting patrons. For a third group, serious scientists trying to understand nature through experience and observation, even if their methods are still imperfect and goals seem unattainable. You're somewhere in the middle. You don't believe in literal miracles, but you believe that human knowledge can and should expand. That through persistent work, one can discover new properties of substances, create new medicines, find new ways to transform matter. And here's what's striking. Despite the mystical aura, most of an alchemist's work is extremely practical. Yes, you dream of great discoveries, but every day you're engaged in quite earthly things, preparing salve for wounds, purifying mercury for mirrors, creating paint for an artist, making cough tincture. It's precisely this practical work that feeds you, pays for expensive materials, maintains the laboratory. And it's precisely this that allows accumulating knowledge that someday, perhaps, will lead to those very great discoveries. Each small experiment, each little improvement of a recipe, this is a brick in the building of science that's being constructed over centuries. You approach the market square. Here it's already noisy, crowded, smelling of fresh bread, fish, spices, leather, horses. Merchants shout prices, buyers haggle, children run between stalls. This is the heart of city life, a place where people of all classes and professions meet.
And you, an alchemist, with your knowledge and dreams, with your practical skills and mystical legends, are part of this lively, noisy, amazing world of 15th century Florence.
You stop at the shop of a spice and herb merchant. Here, it smells so strongly that the aroma is felt several steps away. Cinnamon, cloves, ginger, nutmeg brought from distant eastern lands. And local herbs, rosemary, lavender, thyme, grown in gardens around Florence. The merchant, an elderly man with a grey beard, recognizes you and smiles. He knows you're a regular customer and always sets aside the freshest and highest quality herbs for you. You buy what you need today, a bunch of rosemary, some sage, valerian root. While the merchant wraps the purchase in cloth, he asks if it's true that alchemists can turn lead into gold. You smile. You're asked this question constantly, and each time you have to explain what alchemy truly is. Alchemy is not magic or sorcery, though many think so. It's science, but a special kind of science that exists on the boundary between ancient knowledge and new discoveries. The word alchemy comes from Arabic and even earlier, possibly from an Egyptian or Greek root denoting black earth, what they called the fertile soil of the Nile Valley. This is a hint that alchemy is connected with transformations, with changing some substances into others, similar to how earth transforms a seed into a plant. Alchemy studies the nature of matter, what substances consist of,
How they interact with each other, whether they can be changed, purified,
improved. At the heart of alchemical concepts lies an ancient idea that all substances consist of several basic elements or principles. Greek philosophers spoke of 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Alchemists accepted this idea but developed it further. They speak of 3 principles: sulfur, mercury, and salt. This doesn't mean everything literally consists of these 3 substances. Rather, these are symbols of different properties of matter. Sulfur represents combustibility, activity, the ability to burn. Mercury, fluidity, volatility, the ability to evaporate and condense. Salt, solidity, stability, the ability to maintain form. According to alchemical theory, different substances contain these principles in different proportions, and if one learns to change these proportions, one can transform one substance into another. You know the 3 great goals of alchemy you already thought about this morning. The philosopher's stone, a substance capable of turning ordinary metals into gold and silver. Alchemists believe that gold is the most perfect metal, in which the 3 principles are in ideal balance. Other metals, lead, tin, iron, copper, are imperfect. But if you add the philosopher's stone to them, they'll become perfect, meaning they'll turn into gold. So far, no one has proven this is possible, but many try. The elixir of immortality, a liquid that stops aging and grants eternal life, or at least significantly extends it. And panacea, a universal medicine capable of curing any disease. These three goals inspire alchemists, even if most understand that achieving them is extremely difficult and perhaps impossible. But what do alchemists do in practice, every day, in their laboratories? Very much, and most of this is quite down-to-earth, useful work. First, alchemists create medicines. You know the properties of dozens of herbs and minerals, know how to properly combine them, which doses are safe, how to extract active substances from plants. You make cough tinctures, wound salves, headache powders, stomach-strengthening compounds. Second, alchemists work with metals and minerals. You know how to purify gold and silver from impurities, which is important for jewelers and coin minters. You know how to obtain various alloys, combining metals in different proportions, bronze from copper and tin, brass from copper and zinc. Third, alchemists create dyes and paints. Artists, fabric dyers, scribes decorating manuscripts, all need bright, stable paints, and you know how to obtain them from minerals and plants. The methods an alchemist uses are based on heating, cooling, mixing, and separating substances. One of the main methods is distillation. You heat a liquid, it evaporates, vapor rises through a tube, then cools and condenses back into liquid, but now purer. This way, a mixture can be separated into components. For example, if you distill wine, you get spirits, a pure, combustible liquid used in medicine and in further alchemical processes. If you distill water with herbs, you get aromatic water that preserves the plant's scent and healing properties. Distillation is sometimes repeated many times, 3, 7, even 10 times, so the substance becomes purer and purer. Alchemists believe that with each distillation, the substance approaches its ideal form, quintessence, the fifth essence, free from all impurities. Another important method is calcination, meaning roasting. You heat a substance on strong fire until it turns into powder or ash. This removes everything volatile, combustible, leaving only the stable residue. For example, if you calcinate metal in air, it turns into scale, powder of different color and properties.
Lead becomes yellow or red, copper, green.
These scales are used as paints or as starting material for further transformations. Another method is dissolution. You place a substance in liquid, water, vinegar, wine, oil, and observe whether it dissolves. Some substances dissolve completely, others partially, still others don't dissolve at all. Understanding what dissolves and what helps separate mixtures, purify substances, create new compounds. Sublimation is another process you often use. Some substances, when heated, turn directly into vapor, bypassing the liquid state, then condense back into solid. This is how sulfur or sal ammoniac can be purified. You place the substance in a closed vessel, heat it, vapors rise and settle on the cold upper part of the vessel as crystals, leaving impurities below. Fermentation is a process where substances change under the action of time and heat. For example, grape juice over time turns into wine, and wine, if left open, into vinegar. Alchemists study these transformations, trying to understand what makes substances change on their own. Imagine how painstaking this work is. Each process requires precision. You need to know the right temperature. Too cold and nothing will happen. Too hot and the substance will burn or spoil. You need to know the right proportions. Too much of one ingredient and the mixture won't work. You need to know the right time. Some processes take hours, others days, still others weeks. And all this must be learned through experience, through experiments, through mistakes and repeated attempts. Books on alchemy rarely give exact instructions. They're written in vague, symbolic language full of riddles and metaphors. One alchemist might describe a process as the marriage of the red king and white queen, meaning the combination of sulfur and mercury. Another will call a substance green lion or our infant. This is done partly to protect secrets from the uninitiated, partly because alchemists themselves believe in the symbolic, almost spiritual nature of their work. And here's what's striking. Despite all the mysterious terms and mystical symbols, alchemy produces real, practical results. You and other alchemists discover new substances, develop new technologies, create tools and methods that people of the most varied professions then use. Sulfuric acid, discovered by alchemists, is used for metal processing and fabric dyeing. Nitric acid for dissolving silver and gold for testing metal purity. Distilled water for preparing medicines where absolute purity is needed. Pure alcohol for medicine, for creating perfumes, for dissolving resins and creating varnishes. All this is the result of alchemical work. Alchemists also first created many laboratory instruments and techniques that will become the foundation of future science. Precision scales for weighing the smallest quantities of substance. Thermometers, primitive, but still allowing temperature estimation. Glass vessels of various shapes, each for its purpose. Methods of keeping experiment records, fixing observations, repeating experiments to verify results. All this seems obvious now, but once it needed to be invented, and it was alchemists who stood at the origins of the experimental method. Of course, among alchemists there are also charlatans, people who don't engage in real work, but only promise miracles to wealthy patrons to get money. They say they're about to create the philosopher's stone, ask for a little more time and a little more gold for materials, then disappear. Because of such people, alchemy sometimes gets a bad reputation, and the church views with suspicion all who call themselves alchemists. You try to distinguish yourself from charlatans through honesty. You don't promise the impossible. You tell patrons the truth, that some things you can do and others you cannot yet, that experiments sometimes fail, that the search for new knowledge requires time and patience. You thank the herb merchant, put the purchases in a leather bag, and continue through the market. You need to find a mineral trader. Today you need cinnabar, a red mineral from which mercury can be obtained and which itself is used as paint. While you walk between stalls, thoughts about today's experiment spin in your head. You plan to try a new method of purifying rosemary oil, several distillations in a row, each time with lower temperature. If this works, the oil will become more concentrated, more effective as medicine. This isn't the philosopher's stone or elixir of immortality, but it's a small step forward, a small improvement that can help people. And you take many such steps every day, every week, every year. It's precisely from such small steps that the progress of human knowledge is built. You return to the laboratory with a full bag of ingredients and immediately set to work. Today you plan to conduct a distillation of rosemary oil, a process requiring precision, patience, and constant attention. This is a good example of how alchemy works in practice, how from a simple plant a powerful medicinal substance is obtained. You lay out fresh rosemary on the table, green sprigs with narrow leaves, smell strongly, almost spicy. This scent invigorates and clears the head. Rosemary is used in medicine for improving memory, relieving headaches, strengthening nerves. But to get maximum benefit from the plant, you need to extract from it the essential oil, a volatile substance that contains all the herb's power in concentrated form. First step, grinding. You take a sharp knife and finely chop the rosemary, trying to destroy as many plant cells as possible so the oil releases more easily. The smell becomes even stronger. Your hands smell of rosemary, and this aroma will last for hours. You place the chopped leaves and sprigs in a large copper cauldron. This is the lower part of the alembic, the distillation apparatus. Then you add water, about 3 fingers above the herb level. Water is needed so that when heated, steam will form that will pass through the plant mass and carry away the essential oil. Now you need to install the upper part of the alembic, a copper dome with a long curved spout. The dome fits tightly on the cauldron, and the connection point must be carefully sealed so steam doesn't escape. You use dough made from flour and water for this, a simple but effective method. The dough is smeared along the edge, creating a seal that will harden when heated. The dome's spout connects to a cooling tube, a long copper coil that passes through a container of cold water. The principle works like this. Steam rises from the cauldron into the dome, then goes through the spout into the cooling tube. There it cools and turns back into liquid, which drips into the receiving vessel. This liquid is the distillate, containing essential oil and water. You place the cauldron on the furnace. The fire must be moderate. Too strong heat will make the water boil violently and the plant mass may burn, ruining the entire process. Too weak fire won't give enough steam. You regulate the flame, adding wood and opening or closing furnace dampers to control airflow. This requires experience. You've done this hundreds of times and feel when the temperature is right. Now the waiting begins. Distillation doesn't tolerate haste. The water must slowly heat up, begin to evaporate. The steam must saturate with rosemary aroma. The first drops will appear in the receiver no earlier than half an hour from now. While the cauldron heats, you check other experiments. In the Athanor, the long distillation of herbal tincture you began 3 days ago still continues. You examine the retort. The glass vessel is intact. Liquid inside slowly bubbles. The color has become more transparent than yesterday. This is a good sign. On another table stands a pelican with valerian extract. Liquid circulates through curved tubes, evaporating and condensing again and again. This process must continue another week. You make notes in your journal, current date, state of each experiment, air temperature in the room. All this is important for understanding how external conditions affect results. Imagine how much attention simultaneous management of several processes requires. You need to remember when each experiment was started, how long it should go, when to check, when to add fuel to the furnace, when to change water in the cooler. One missed moment, and the experiment can be ruined, and with it expensive materials and days of work are lost. Therefore, an alchemist rarely leaves the laboratory for long. You sleep right here, wake several times during the night to check the furnaces. You eat simple food that can be quickly prepared or brought with you. Your life is subordinated to the rhythms of experiments. You return to the alembic. The cauldron is already hot, and you hear the first sounds of boiling water, quiet bubbling inside. Soon steam will go. You check the tightness of connections, bring your hand to the joints, feel where the hot air is escaping.
Everything is tight.
You check the cooling container. The water in it must be cold to effectively condense steam. If the water heats up, you'll need to replace it with fresh water from the well. Everything is ready. Now just wait. After some time you see the first drops in the receiving vessel. They fall slowly with intervals of several seconds. The liquid is transparent with a faint greenish tint. The smell is strong, concentrated rosemary, almost intoxicating. This is a good sign, means the essential oil is indeed passing into the distillate. Drops fall more frequently, establishing an even rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. You watch this process with satisfaction.
Everything is going correctly.
Temperature is stable, tightness isn't broken, cooling is working. And here's what's striking about the distillation process. It's simultaneously simple and complex. The principle is understandable even to a child. Heated, evaporated, cooled, collected. But the devil is in the details. Temperature must be such that precisely the essential oil evaporates together with water, but not other, heavier substances. Distillation speed must be slow so steam has time to saturate with oil. Cooling must be sufficient so all steam condenses, but not excessive, otherwise part of the oil may freeze in the tube. All this you learn not from books, but through many years of experience, through mistakes, through observation, through intuition that develops in a true master. Distillation continues several hours. You periodically approach, check, regulate the fire, change water in the cooler. Between checks you're occupied with other matters, grinding minerals in a mortar for preparing paint, reading an old treatise on alchemy that your patron gave you last week, making notes. Life in the laboratory flows measuredly without fuss, but also without downtime. There's always something to do. By the end of distillation, about 1 liter of liquid has collected in the receiving vessel. You extinguish the fire in the furnace, wait for the cauldron to cool. then disassemble the alembic. The plant mass inside has darkened, given up all its oil. It can be thrown away or used as compost for a garden. You pour the distillate into a transparent glass vessel and place it on a shelf.
Now you need to wait.
In a few hours, the essential oil, which is lighter than water, will float to the surface as a thin layer. It can be carefully collected with a pipette or special instrument, a glass tube with a narrow spout. This layer of oil is true treasure. From a whole armful of rosemary, you get only a few drops of pure essential oil, but these drops are incredibly concentrated. One drop in water and you get a medicinal solution. Several drops on a piece of cloth and the room fills with aroma that clears breathing and invigorates. But the work doesn't end here. You plan to conduct a second distillation. Repeat the process with the already obtained distillate. This is called rectification or redistillation. The goal, to purify the oil even more, remove remaining water and impurities. After the second distillation, the oil becomes even purer, even stronger. Some alchemists conduct 7 distillations in a row, believing that the number 7 has special meaning, and that with each distillation, the substance approaches its ideal form, quintessence. You're not sure there's magical meaning in this, but the practical effect is obvious. The substance indeed becomes purer. Imagine how many such processes exist in an alchemist's arsenal.
Calcination, roasting substances to powder.
Dissolution, immersion in liquids to extract needed components. Coagulation, thickening of liquids into solid masses. Fermentation, slow change of substances under the action of time and heat. Sublimation, transition from solid state to gaseous and back, bypassing liquid phase. Each process has its rules, its subtleties, its dangers. Sulfur can't be heated too quickly, otherwise it will ignite with blue flame and fill the room with poisonous smoke. Mercury can't be kept in an open vessel because it slowly evaporates, and these vapors are harmful. Some acids corrode metals and even glass. They must be stored in special ceramic vessels coated with wax inside. Each day brings new observations. Today you notice that the rosemary distillate has a slightly different shade than last time, perhaps because the plant was collected at a different time of year, or because the temperature was slightly different. You make a note about this in your journal. Such details seem insignificant, but over time, understanding builds from them. Which factors affect the result, how to control them, how to achieve consistency. Science is built precisely this way, through thousands of small observations, through attention to details, through patient accumulation of knowledge. You look at the shelves with vessels, at instruments laid out on tables, at furnaces where long processes slowly proceed. This laboratory is your world, a place where theory meets practice, where ancient legends about the philosopher's stone coexist with quite practical work on creating medicines and paints. Here you feel in your place. Here each day brings small victories and sometimes defeats. Here you're a particle of a great tradition that stretches from the depths of centuries and perhaps will extend into the future, transforming into something new, more perfect. An alchemist's work is service to knowledge, constant search, endless curiosity, and faith that the world can be understood and changed for the better. After lunch, you again leave the laboratory, this time not just for shopping, but with a business visit. One of Florence's largest textile masters sent a servant in the morning with a request to stop by and discuss a problem with dyes. Textile production is the city's main wealth, and here alchemy plays a huge role. Florentine fabrics are famous throughout Europe precisely for their rich, stable colors that don't fade in the sun and don't dull after washing. Behind these colors stands complex chemical work, and you, as an alchemist, are often invited to solve problems or improve technologies. You walk toward the river, where the dye works are located. Even from afar you smell the specific odor, a mixture of wet wool, smoke from furnaces, sour aroma of mordant, and sharp notes of dyes. This isn't the most pleasant district of the city, but one of the most important for the economy. You enter a large room with high ceilings and open windows for ventilation. Here stand enormous vats of wood and copper, some the size of a person. In them water boils with dissolved dyes, and workers lower bundles of white woolen fabric on long poles, turn them, monitor so the paint lays evenly. Steam stands thick, condensation drops stream down walls. Workers' hands are stained different colors: blue, red, yellow. These stains don't wash off for weeks. The dye works master, a sturdy middle-aged man with forearms stained blue, meets you and immediately leads to the problem vat. They're trying to get a deep red color using kermes, a dye made from dried insects of a special kind. These insects live on oaks in southern regions. They're collected, dried, ground into powder. From this powder, with proper treatment, a rich red color is obtained, which is valued very highly. Rich people are willing to pay enormous money for fabric dyed with real kermes. But now something's going wrong. The color comes out pale, uneven, with a brownish tint instead of pure red. You approach the vat. Look at the boiling liquid, smell the steam. Take some fabric with a stick and examine it. You ask questions. What water did they use, river or well? What mordant did they apply before dyeing? How long did they boil? What fire did they maintain? Mordant is the key moment in dyeing. Before lowering fabric into dye, it needs to be treated with a special substance that helps paint fix on fibers.
Usually alum is used, a mineral salt brought from distant regions.
Alum is dissolved in water, boiled with fabric. Then fabric is dried and only after this dyed. If mordant is done incorrectly, too little alum was taken or it was dissolved in too hard water, paint won't fix properly. You quickly understand the problem. They used river water, which recently has become more turbid due to rains upstream. This water has too many impurities, clay, minerals, that interfere with alum working properly. The solution is simple. First, let the water settle for several days in large vats so sediment falls to the bottom, then carefully pour off clean water from the top. Or even better, use well water, which is cleaner. Also, you advise increasing the amount of alum in the mordant solution and extending boiling time by half an hour. The master thanks you, promises to try, and if it works, will bring you a sample of new fabric to the laboratory and small payment for consultation. Imagine how many different dyes are used in textile production. Blue color is obtained from woad, a plant specially grown for this purpose. Woad leaves are collected, ground into pulp, left to ferment in pits, then formed into lumps and dried. These dry lumps are a commodity sold throughout Europe. To use the dye, lumps are soaked in water with addition of lime and urine. Yes, ordinary urine, which contains ammonia and helps the dye dissolve. The mixture ferments for several days in a warm place, after which fabric is lowered into it. Surprisingly, when fabric is removed from the vat, it's first green, and only in air, oxidizing, becomes blue. This always looks like a small miracle for those who see it the first time. Yellow color is obtained from many sources: saffron, turmeric, reseda, chamomile. Saffron gives an especially bright golden shade, but this is the most expensive dye in the world. Saffron is dried stigmas of crocus flowers, and to get 1 kilogram of saffron, you need to collect flowers from an enormous area. Therefore, saffron is used only for the most expensive fabrics, intended for kings and popes. For ordinary purposes, they take cheaper sources of yellow. Green color is obtained by combining blue and yellow. First fabric is dyed with woad, then again with yellow dye. Brown and black are obtained from oak bark, gall nuts, iron vitriol. Purple is the most complex color, obtained from rare sea snails or mixing red and blue, but the result is often unstable. You leave the dye works and head to the quarter where artists live and work. You're expected in a workshop where several apprentices are preparing boards for a new, large icon. The workshop master ordered from you a batch of special blue pigment, ultramarine. This is the most expensive paint in the world of artists, more expensive than gold in the literal sense. Ultramarine is made from lapis lazuli, a beautiful blue stone brought from very distant eastern mountains, from lands beyond Persia. The stone is carried by caravans for months, through mountains and deserts, then trading ships deliver it to European ports. The cost is enormous even before chemical processing begins. The process of obtaining ultramarine is complex and long. First, lapis lazuli must be pounded into the finest powder, work that takes hours. Then this powder is mixed with melted wax, resin, and oil, kneaded into dough, and left for several days. Then this dough is kneaded for a long time underwater. The blue pigment gradually washes out into the water, while impurities remain in the dough. The water with pigment is poured into a clean vessel, left to settle. Then the water is carefully drained off, and the powder settled at the bottom is dried. This is ultramarine, a blue powder of incredible beauty that artists use for the most important details of paintings. The robes of the Madonna, the sky, precious stones in images. From a kilogram of lapis lazuli, only a small handful of pure pigment is obtained, and each gram is valued at the weight of gold. You hand the master a small leather pouch with ultramarine, the result of a week's work. The master opens it, looks at the powder in the light, nods with satisfaction. The color is correct, deep, rich, with a slight purple tint. He pays you the agreed sum, substantial, because this price includes not only the stone itself, but your work, your knowledge of the process, your responsibility for quality. In the workshop, you see apprentices preparing other paints, grinding cinnabar for red, malachite for green, lead white for white. Each paint requires its own preparation technique, and artists depend on alchemists in obtaining quality pigments. And here's what's striking. Without alchemy, there would not be that Renaissance art for which Florence is famous. The great frescoes, icons, paintings created in this city that will delight people for centuries are possible only thanks to paints that alchemists create. Bright colors that don't fade, that are preserved for decades. This is the result of chemical knowledge, correct choice of materials, precise following of processes. Art and science here are inseparable. After visiting the artist, you stop at the jeweler's shop. He asks for your help with gold purification. Jewelers constantly face a problem. Gold that merchants sell them is rarely pure. Usually it's an alloy of gold with silver, copper, sometimes other metals. To make a quality ornament, high purity gold is needed, and here alchemy comes to help. There exists a process called cupellation. An alloy of gold with other metals is melted together with lead in a special porous bowl made of bone ash called a cupel. At high temperature, the lead oxidizes, and together with it other impurities oxidize, silver, copper. The oxides are absorbed into the cupel's porous walls, and pure gold, which doesn't oxidize, remains in the center as a small, shining drop. You explain to the jeweler the process subtleties, the right temperature, holding time, how to know when purification is complete. You return to the laboratory when the sun is already declining towards sunset. Today's day has shown once again how wide your craft is. An alchemist is not a recluse locked in a tower with books and flasks. An alchemist is an important part of city life, a person whose knowledge is needed in dozens of different productions and crafts. Dyers, artists, jewelers, apothecaries, physicians, metallurgists, glassblowers all turn to you for advice, for materials, for solving problems. And there's deep satisfaction in this, knowing that your work has real significance, that your knowledge helps create beauty, heal diseases, make people's lives better. Evening comes slowly, and you light candles in the laboratory. Their soft light casts long shadows on walls, making glass vessels glitter mysteriously, as if they're filled not with liquids, but with captured starlight. Today was filled with practical work, but now, in evening silence, your thoughts return to deeper aspects of alchemy, to that ancient knowledge passed from generation to generation, often in encrypted form, hidden behind symbols and metaphors. Alchemy is not only chemistry and craft, it's a philosophy of transformation, teaching that everything in the world can be changed, purified, elevated to perfection. You take from a chest an old manuscript that your teacher gave you many years ago before death. The parchment has yellowed with time, ink has faded in places, but the text is still readable. This is a treatise by an unknown alchemist who lived perhaps 200 years ago. The text is written in mysterious language, full of symbols. In the margins are drawn strange diagrams, circles, triangles, serpents biting their own tails, sun and moon in embrace, kings and queens in crowns. For the uninitiated, this looks like a collection of nonsense or magical spells. But you know that behind these symbols are hidden real chemical processes and deep philosophical ideas. The serpent biting its tail is called Ouroboros. This is a symbol of cyclicality, eternal return. It reminds that in alchemy many processes repeat again and again, distillation, dissolution, coagulation, until the substance reaches perfection. The Red King and White Queen are sulfur and mercury, two principles of matter, masculine and feminine beginnings. Their marriage symbolizes the union of opposites, creation of a new substance from two different ones. The sun is gold, the perfect metal. The moon is silver, also noble, but second in dignity. Alchemists believe that all metals grow in earth like plantae, slowly transforming from imperfect forms to perfect. Lead is an infant among metals, and gold is maturity. The alchemist's task is to accelerate this natural process, help metal become what it's destined to be. You read one of the manuscript sections describing the process of creating the red lion, a mystical substance that, according to the text, possesses incredible power. The description is vague. Take the green dragon and place it in a cave where there is no light. Feed it its own tail until it becomes black as night. Then raise it to the heavens through 7 gates, and it will become white as snow. Finally, unite it with the red rose in hellish flame, and the red lion will be born, king of all beings. What does this actually mean? You ponder, comparing with other texts you've read. Perhaps the green dragon is copper vitriol, green crystals. The cave without light is a closed vessel. Blackness is the stage of decomposition when heated. 7 gates are 7 distillations. Whiteness is purification. The red rose is adding sulfur or cinnabar. The red lion is the final substance, possibly a strong acid or medicinal agent. And here's what's striking. Behind all this mystical symbolism are hidden real chemical knowledge, but transmitted so that only the initiated can understand. Why did alchemists write so complexly? Partly to protect secrets from the uninitiated and especially from the church, which viewed too deep investigations of nature with suspicion. Partly because alchemists themselves believed in the spiritual dimension of their work. Transforming lead into gold is not only a chemical process, but a metaphor for transforming the human soul from a low state to high, from ignorance to wisdom, from mortality to immortality. Work in the laboratory and work on oneself went in parallel. Purifying substances, the alchemist purified his own spirit. You think about colors that play a huge role in alchemical symbolism. Black color is nigredo, the stage of decomposition and death when the old form is destroyed. White is albedo, purification, birth of something new and pure. Yellow is citrinitas, an intermediate stage like dawn.
Red is rubedo, the final stage, perfection, completion of the great work.
These colors aren't just symbols, they're really observed in the process of many chemical reactions. When you heat lead in air, it first darkens, then becomes yellow, then red. When you purify sulfur, it passes through different shades. Ancient alchemists observed these changes and gave them deep meaning, seeing in substance transformations a reflection of cosmic laws. Imagine what an alchemist feels when, following the mysterious instructions of an ancient text, actually obtains something amazing.
You yourself have experienced such moments.
Once, following a recipe from an old Arabic manuscript, you mixed vitriol with saltpeter and sulfur, heated in a closed retort, and obtained a liquid that dissolved silver but didn't touch gold. This was aqua regia, liquid of kings capable of separating noble metals. In that moment, you felt connection with those ancient sages who centuries ago discovered this process and recorded it in encrypted form. You touched secret knowledge that's transmitted not through loud teaching, but through quiet transmission from teacher to student, through long years of practice and reflection. There exist legends about great alchemical secrets that are still not revealed. They say that in monastery libraries in the East are stored manuscripts written by the Arab masters themselves, Jabir, Al-Razi, Avicenna, where processes are described that European alchemists don't yet understand. They say that in Egypt, in ancient temples, on walls are preserved hieroglyphs describing secrets of Egyptian priests who knew how to mummify bodies so they wouldn't decompose for millennia.
What substances did they use?
What processes did they know? They say that Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary sage of antiquity, left a book where all knowledge of alchemy is recorded, but this book was lost or hidden, and only fragments reach us in quotations. You yourself don't know where the boundary is between real history and legend. Perhaps many of these stories are exaggerated or invented, but perhaps there's a grain of truth in them. Perhaps there really existed people who knew more than is known now, and their knowledge was lost in wars, fires, with the destruction of libraries. The fall of Constantinople several years ago is another reminder of how fragile accumulated knowledge is.
How many manuscripts perished in the city's capture? How many secrets went up in flames?
But there's also hope. Those Greek scholars who fled to the west brought books with them. Merchants traveling to the east sometimes bring strange texts written in Arabic or Persian. You heard that in Venice recently appeared a printing press where they've started printing books with metal letters, an incredible technology that will allow multiplying texts much faster than hand copying. Perhaps soon, alchemical knowledge will become more accessible, and a new generation of researchers will be able to move further, relying on predecessors' work. The candle burns down, wax flows. You close the old manuscript and place it back in the chest. Tomorrow, practical tasks await you: distillation, preparing medicines, consultations. But this evening, you touched the mystical side of your craft, those deep mysteries that make alchemy not simply science, but a philosophy of life, transformation of matter, search for perfection,
Striving to understand the hidden laws of the world. All this is not just work.
It's a path you walk all your life, knowing there's no end to this path. Because knowledge is infinite and nature's mysteries are inexhaustible. Night descends on Florence and the city gradually quiets. Only in some windows do lights still flicker. In bakeries where dough is needed for morning bread, in jewelers' workshops where urgent orders are finished, and in laboratories like yours, where work knows no distinction between day and night. You sit by the light of several candles and unfold a leather roll that your patron gave you a week ago. Inside is an ancient manuscript written in Greek with notes in the margins in Arabic. The parchment is dark with time and smells of smoke. Perhaps this text miraculously escaped fire during Constantinople's fall. Each such book now is worth its weight in gold, because many libraries were looted or burned, and what scholars fleeing west managed to take out is a tiny part of the enormous heritage. You slowly translate the text.
Your Greek isn't perfect, but sufficient for understanding.
This is a treatise on preparing special medicines written, judging by everything, by a Byzantine physician alchemist several centuries ago. The author refers to even more ancient sources, to the works of Greek philosophers, to Arab sages, to Egyptian papyri. He describes a recipe for Greek fire, Byzantium's legendary weapon, a substance that burned even on water and struck terror into enemies. The exact composition of Greek fire was a state secret of the empire, and perhaps this secret died with it. The manuscript has hints, but not a full recipe. Petroleum is mentioned, sulfur, resin, some secret additives. You understand that completely recreating this substance is impossible from fragmentary description. But the very idea is captivating, a liquid that continues burning even in water. That's impossible to extinguish. Further in the text come medicine recipes.
one attracts your attention.
This is a description of theriac, a legendary antidote that was believed to protect against all poisons and many diseases. Theriac has ancient history. Its recipe goes back to the times of the Greek physician Galen, who lived in the 2nd century AD. But over time, the recipe changed. Each alchemist and physician added something of their own, until theriac came to include dozens of ingredients. The manuscript lists 64 components: opium, myrrh, saffron, cinnamon, ginger, pepper, various herbs, crushed precious stones, even dried viper flesh. Yes, snake meat was considered an important ingredient of theriac, hence the name, from the Greek word therion, meaning wild beast or venomous animal. Imagine the complexity of preparing such a medicine. You need to collect all ingredients, many of which are brought from distant lands: saffron from Persia, myrrh from Arabia, opium from Asia Minor. Each component needs proper preparation: drying, grinding, measuring exact weight. Then everything is mixed with honey and wine, kept in clay vessels for months, sometimes years, so components ripen and combine. Ready theriac is a thick, dark paste with a strong, complex smell. It's taken in tiny doses the size of a pea, dissolving in wine or water. It's believed that theriac not only protects from poisons, but also strengthens the organism, extends life, heals many diseases.
How true is this?
You don't know for certain. Opium in the composition undoubtedly has a strong effect, relieves pain, calms, induces sleep. Many herbs have medicinal properties, but whether all this works together as a universal remedy is a question of faith and experience. And here's what's striking: theriac was so important and expensive that its preparation in some cities was controlled by authorities. In Venice, for example, theriac was prepared publicly in the square with witnesses, so no one could fake the recipe or replace expensive ingredients with cheap ones. Apothecaries caught faking theriac were punished very strictly. This medicine was bought by kings and popes. Travelers took it with them when going to dangerous lands. Faith in its power was enormous, and perhaps this very faith strengthened the effect. Psychological impact can be no less powerful than chemical. You continue reading the manuscript. The next section is devoted to Arabic alchemy, and here the text becomes even more captivating. The author writes about a meeting with an Arab alchemist in Baghdad when Byzantium still traded with the East. That alchemist showed him water that corrodes any metal except gold. This is undoubtedly aqua regia, a mixture of acids. Showed powder that when falling into fire flashed with bright white flame, possibly magnesium or phosphorus. Showed liquid that self-ignited in air, probably something from the family of pyrophoric substances. The Byzantine author was amazed by the depth of Arabic knowledge and regretted that between Christian and Islamic worlds there exists enmity preventing free exchange of knowledge, Araby. Alchemists indeed reached incredible heights. Jabir ibn Hayyan, who lived in the 8th century, discovered sulfuric and nitric acids, substances of enormous importance. Al-Razi, who lived in the 9th century, classified all known substances into plant, animal, and mineral, described many chemical processes, developed instruments and methods. Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, wrote the Canon of Medicine, an encyclopedia that became the main medical textbook for centuries forward. These people weren't mystics detached from reality. They were practitioners, experimenters, people who combined theory with experience, and their works, translated into Latin, became the foundation of European science. Imagine the path these knowledge traveled. The ancient Greeks, Aristotle, Galen, Dioscorides, wrote works about nature, medicine, properties of substances. After the fall of the Roman Empire in the West, these texts were mostly forgotten, but preserved in Byzantium. The Arabs, who conquered enormous territories from Spain to India, encountered Greek heritage, translated texts into Arabic, studied them, supplemented them with their own observations and discoveries. Then through Spain and Sicily, where Christians and Muslims neighbored, this knowledge returned to Europe, already enriched. You hold in your hands one such text. It traveled through centuries and countries, through wars and catastrophes, and now lies before you by candlelight in a laboratory in Florence. This is almost incredible. The manuscript has drawings, diagrams of alchemical apparatus, images of plants, astrological tables. Astrology and alchemy were closely linked in medieval worldview. It was believed that planets influence metals and processes. The sun is connected with gold, the moon with silver, Mars with iron, Venus with copper, Mercury with quicksilver, Jupiter with tin, Saturn with lead. The best time to begin an alchemical process was determined by planetary positions in the sky. If the moon is in favorable phase, distillation will go more successfully. If Mars is in unfortunate position, work with iron may not succeed. You yourself aren't completely sure how true this is, but tradition is strong and you sometimes check astrological tables, especially when beginning an important experiment. Perhaps this is simply a way to choose favorable time, create the right mood. Or perhaps there really are subtle influences that science doesn't yet understand. There exist legends that somewhere in the East, in secret libraries or monasteries, even more ancient knowledge is stored. From Egyptian priests, from Babylonian sages, from Persian magi. They say Egyptians knew how to mummify bodies so perfectly that they're preserved for millennia. What substances did they use? They say that in pyramids, glass lenses were found, meaning the ancients knew optics. They say that in the Alexandrian library burned ages ago, texts were stored containing secrets now lost forever. How much knowledge has humanity accumulated and lost in endless wars, fires, destructions, and how much still remains to be rediscovered? You carefully roll up the manuscript and place it in a safe place. This book is treasure, more valuable than gold or precious stones. It contains the experience of generations, knowledge of people who devoted their lives to seeking truth. And now this relay is passed to you. You'll study the text, try to reproduce described processes, add your observations, and perhaps someday will pass this knowledge forward to the next generation of alchemists who will continue the great work. Work on transforming the darkness of ignorance into the light of understanding, on seeking ways to heal, improve, extend life. Work that never ends because nature's mysteries are infinite and each answer births new questions. The next morning, a monk from the Dominican monastery comes to your laboratory. You recognize him. Brother Tommaso, an educated man who studied philosophy at university. He sometimes stops by for medicines for the monastery infirmary or to discuss questions of nature's things. The church and alchemy have complex relations, not simply hostile as many think, but not simple either. Some monks are interested in science, see in studying nature a way to better understand God's creation. Others relate with suspicion, believing that man shouldn't try to change what the Creator made. Brother Tommaso belongs to the first group, but today there's concern on his face. He sits on a bench by the window and is silent for some time, choosing words. Then he says, "An inquisitor from Rome has arrived in the city, a man of strict views, sent to check whether heresies and dangerous teachings are spreading in rich and freedom-loving Florence. The Inquisitor has already visited several workshops, asked questions about who in the city practices alchemy, whether anyone promises to create gold, whether anyone claims they can extend life to immortality. Brother Tommaso came to warn. You need to be careful, not attract attention, not make loud statements. The Church isn't against alchemy as such, but against deception and what might seem like an attempt to surpass divine will." You thank the monk for the warning. You know the history of church prohibitions on alchemy. In 1317, Pope John XXIII issued the decree Spondent quas non exhibent. They promise what they cannot deliver. The decree was directed against charlatans who deceived people, promising to turn lead into gold, took money and disappeared. Or even worse, actually produced fake gold, covered lead with a thin layer of real gold, passing it off as transmutation. This undermined the economy, caused distrust of coins, created chaos. The papal decree banned attempts to create gold by alchemical means and established severe punishments for fraud. But the decree didn't ban alchemy itself. Medical research, creating medicines, studying properties of substances remained permissible, if not accompanied by deception or claims of miracles. The problem is that the boundary between permissible and forbidden is often blurred. What counts as deception? If an alchemist sincerely believes he can create the philosopher's stone and works on it, spending years of life and his own means, is this heresy or simply delusion? If an alchemist creates a medicine and claims it extends life based on observations but cannot prove it absolutely, is this deception or an honest attempt to help? Church judges in different places and different times interpreted these questions differently, and an alchemist's fate could depend on who exactly would judge him. Imagine how differently alchemy was treated in various European countries. In Italy, especially in rich city republics like Florence and Venice, the attitude was relatively tolerant. Wealthy patrons protected their alchemists. City authorities understood the economic value of producing dyes, medicines, purifying metals. As long as an alchemist wasn't caught in outright fraud and didn't make too scandalous statements, he was left alone. In France, the situation was more complex. After the destruction of the Templar Order in the early 14th century, when knights were accused of heresy and many burned at stakes, French authorities became especially suspicious of anything that might seem like secret knowledge or occult practice. Alchemists were sometimes accused of witchcraft, especially if their experiments were too mysterious or if they worked at night, which looked suspicious to neighbors. In Germany, alchemy developed in an atmosphere of fragmentation, hundreds of small principalities, each with its own laws. In some places, princes patronized alchemists, hoping to find a way to replenish the treasury by creating gold. In other places, church authorities persecuted for magical practices. This led to secret alchemical societies appearing in Germany, groups of people who gathered in closed rooms, exchanged knowledge but kept this in strict secrecy from outsiders. In England, kings showed interest in metal transmutation. King Edward III even issued a decree inviting alchemists to work for the crown, promising protection and financing. But there were also cases when alchemists deceived the king, after which executions followed. In Spain, alchemy was colored by the heritage of Arab rule. Many alchemical texts were translated from Arabic, and this aroused suspicion of the Inquisition. After the Reconquista and expulsion of Muslims and Jews, Spain became especially strict in religious matters, and practicing alchemy could attract unwanted attention. And here's what's striking. The church wasn't monolithic in its attitude toward science. Among monks and priests were educated people who themselves studied nature. Roger Bacon, a Franciscan monk of the 13th century, was an outstanding scientist. He studied optics, invented eyeglasses, described gunpowder, conducted alchemical experiments. His work sometimes aroused suspicion. He spent years under supervision of his order, but wasn't condemned for heresy. Albertus Magnus, a Dominican monk, also practiced alchemy, described many minerals and processes, and the Church recognized his scholarship, even canonizing him as blessed. This shows that the boundary ran not between church and science in general, but between what was considered permissible, investigation of God's creation, and what looked like an attempt to surpass God or deceive people, philosophical. Discussions about the nature of matter were a constant field of tension. Church teaching, based on Aristotle's works, asserted that each substance has its form and essence given by God. Can this essence be changed? If an alchemist turns lead into gold, does he change the very nature created by God, or simply purifies lead, releasing gold that was already hidden in it? These questions were discussed in universities, in monasteries, in private conversations. Some theologians said that man, as the crown of creation, received reason from God precisely to understand and improve the world. Others objected that there are limits man shouldn't cross, that some things must remain a mystery known only to the Creator. Imagine an alchemist's position in this complex situation. On one hand, you're engaged in what you consider useful and important, creating medicines, helping artists and craftsmen, expanding knowledge boundaries. On the other hand, you must always be on guard, watch what you say, how you present your work, whether you attract suspicions. You cannot loudly announce that you're working on the Philosopher's Stone or Elixir of Immortality, even if you're actually doing this within research. You need to speak carefully, using vague formulations, emphasizing practical benefit of your work, avoiding everything that might be interpreted as heresy or magic. You know stories of alchemists who were less fortunate. Nicolas Flamel, a Parisian scribe about whom legends circulated that he found the Philosopher's Stone, in reality, most likely, simply a lucky merchant who got rich on real estate deals. But rumor attributed his wealth to alchemy. After his death, a hunt began for his notes. His grave was opened, searching for secrets. In England, an alchemist named George Ripley was accused of fraud when he couldn't fulfill his promise to create gold for the king, and he had to flee to the continent. In France and Germany, there were cases when alchemists were accused of witchcraft and burned at stakes, especially if they were foreigners, Jews, or too eccentric in behavior. Fear and ignorance often proved stronger than reason and justice, but there were also opposite stories. Paracelsus, a Swiss alchemist and physician who lived not long ago, openly criticized traditional medicine, claimed that alchemy should serve medicine, not the search for gold, developed new medicines based on minerals. He was considered a heretic and troublemaker. He was expelled from several cities, but he continued to work, write, teach, and his ideas gradually spread despite resistance. This shows that even in an atmosphere of suspicion and control, there were possibilities for those who were brave enough and convinced of their rightness. You sit after Brother Tommaso's departure and think. An inquisitor in the city is serious but not a catastrophe. You're not doing anything forbidden. You don't promise to create gold, don't present yourself as a miracle worker, don't deceive patrons. Your work is honest, practical, useful. But perhaps it's worth temporarily postponing experiments with more controversial texts, not discussing ideas about life extension publicly, keeping the most mysterious manuscripts hidden. You need to survive this period, as many before you survived. Knowledge is patient, it can wait until danger passes. And danger always passes, inquisitors leave, attention switches to other matters, and work continues. So it was for centuries, so it will be forward. Because human curiosity is indestructible, and the desire to understand the world is stronger than any prohibitions. After midday, a servant of one of the rich merchants comes to you. His master has been ill for several days, and the house physician cannot relieve the condition. You're asked to come and see whether you can help with your alchemical remedies. You take a leather bag in which you always carry basic medicines, several vials with tinctures, bottles with powders, jars with salves, and go to the sick person's house. Medical alchemy is the most important part of your work, the area where alchemy truly brings real, measurable benefit to people. Here, legends about the Philosopher's Stone aren't needed. Here, concrete results matter. Pain relief, fever reduction, wound healing, strength restoration. The merchant's house is large, richly furnished. You're led to a bedroom on the second floor. The sick man lies in bed, pale with moist forehead. Nearby sits a physician, an elderly man in a dark mantle with a book in his hands. He nods to you grimly. Physicians and alchemists sometimes compete, but more often cooperate. Each has his own methods, his own knowledge. You ask about symptoms. The sick man complains of severe weakness, loss of appetite, stomach pains, slight fever. The physician already tried bloodletting, a standard treatment method in medieval medicine, based on the theory that illness is caused by excess of one of the body's 4 fluids. But no improvement came. You examine the sick man, ask questions about what he ate the last days, where he was, whether he contacted other sick people. Gradually a picture forms. Probably this is digestive disorder, possibly caused by spoiled food or bad water. The fever is mild, which is good. meaning this isn't one of the severe fevers that mow people down indiscriminately. You take from the bag a small vial with dark liquid. This is a tincture of wormwood and mint in alcohol, a remedy you prepare regularly. Wormwood possesses bitterness that stimulates digestion and kills intestinal parasites. Mint calms the stomach, relieves nausea. Alcohol serves as solvent and preservative, and also itself has disinfecting properties. You give the sick man 20 drops of tincture in a small amount of water. Then you take out another vial. This is a decoction of chamomile and ginger that should be drunk 3 times a day. Chamomile relieves inflammation, ginger warms, improves circulation, helps the organism fight infection. You also advise the sick man to abstain from heavy food for several days, only light broth, bread, diluted wine. The organism must recover, and for this it doesn't need to be burdened with digesting fatty meat or spicy dishes. The physician listens, nods. Your advice is reasonable and doesn't contradict his own notions about medicine. Imagine how 15th century medicine differs from what will be known centuries later. Physicians don't know about the existence of microbes, bacteria, viruses. They don't understand how circulation works, how internal organs function. The problem is that the boundary between permissible and forbidden is often blurred. What counts as deception? If an alchemist sincerely believes he can create the philosopher's stone and works on it, spending years of life in his own means, is this heresy or simply delusion? If an alchemist creates a medicine and claims it extends life based on observations but cannot prove it absolutely, is this deception or an honest attempt to help? Church judges in different places and different times interpreted these questions differently, and an alchemist's fate could depend on who exactly would judge him. Imagine how differently alchemy was treated in various European countries. In Italy, especially in rich city republics like Florence and Venice, the attitude was relatively tolerant. Wealthy patrons protected their alchemists. City authorities understood the economic value of producing dyes, medicines, purifying metals. As long as an alchemist wasn't caught in outright fraud and didn't make too scandalous statements, he was left alone. In France, the situation was more complex. After the destruction of the Templar Order in the early 14th century, when knights were accused of heresy and many burned at stakes, French authorities became especially suspicious of anything that might seem like secret knowledge or occult practice. Alchemists were sometimes accused of witchcraft, especially if their experiments were too mysterious or if they worked at night, which looked suspicious to neighbors. In Germany, alchemy developed in an atmosphere of fragmentation, hundreds of small principalities, each with its own laws. In some places, princes patronized alchemists, hoping to find a way to replenish the treasury by creating gold. In other places, church authorities persecuted for magical practices. This led to secret alchemical societies appearing in Germany, groups of people who gathered in closed rooms, exchanged knowledge but kept this in strict secrecy from outsiders. In England, kings showed interest in metal transmutation. King Edward III even issued a decree inviting alchemists to work for the crown, promising protection and financing. But there were also cases when alchemists deceived the king, after which executions followed. In Spain, alchemy was colored by the heritage of Arab rule. Many alchemical texts were translated from Arabic, and this aroused suspicion of the Inquisition. After the Reconquista and expulsion of Muslims and Jews, Spain became especially strict in religious matters, and practicing alchemy could attract unwanted attention. And here's what's striking. The church wasn't monolithic in its attitude towards science. Among monks and priests were educated people who themselves studied nature. Roger Bacon, a Franciscan monk of the 13th century, was an outstanding scientist. He studied optics, invented eyeglasses, described gunpowder, conducted alchemical experiments. His work sometimes aroused suspicion. He spent years under supervision of his order, but wasn't condemned for heresy. Albertus Magnus, a Dominican monk, also practiced alchemy, described many minerals and processes, and the church recognized his scholarship, even canonizing him as blessed. This shows that the boundary ran not between church and science in general, But between what was considered permissible, investigation of God's creation and what looked like an attempt to surpass God or deceive people, philosophical, discussions about the nature of matter were a constant field of tension. Church teaching, based on Aristotle's works, asserted that each substance has its form and essence given by God. Can this essence be changed? If an alchemist turns lead into gold, does he change the very nature created by God, or simply purifies lead, releasing gold that was already hidden in it? These questions were discussed in universities, in monasteries, in private conversations. Some theologians said that man, as the crown of creation, received reason from God precisely to understand and improve the world. Others objected that there are limits man shouldn't cross, that some things must remain a mystery known only to the Creator. Imagine an alchemist's position in this complex situation. On one hand, you're engaged in what you consider useful and important, creating medicines, helping artists and craftsmen, expanding knowledge boundaries. On the other hand, you must always be on guard, watch what you say, how you present your work, whether you attract suspicions. You cannot loudly announce that you're working on the Philosopher's Stone or Elixir of Immortality, even if you're actually doing this within research. You need to speak carefully, using vague formulations, emphasizing practical benefit of your work, avoiding everything that might be interpreted as heresy or magic. You know stories of alchemists who were less fortunate. Nicolas Flamel, a Parisian scribe about whom legends circulated that he found the Philosopher's Stone. In reality, most likely, simply a lucky merchant who got rich on real estate deals. But rumor attributed his wealth to alchemy. After his death, a hunt began for his notes. His grave was opened, searching for secrets. In England, an alchemist named George Ripley was accused of fraud when he couldn't fulfill his promise to create gold for the king, and he had to flee to the continent. In France and Germany, there were cases when alchemists were accused of witchcraft and burned at stakes, especially if they were foreigners, Jews, or too eccentric in behavior. Fear and ignorance often proved stronger than reason and justice, but there were also opposite stories. Paracelsus, a Swiss alchemist and physician who lived not long ago, openly criticized traditional medicine, claimed that alchemy should serve medicine, not the search for gold, developed new medicines based on minerals. He was considered a heretic and troublemaker. He was expelled from several cities, but he continued to work, write, teach, and his ideas gradually spread despite resistance. This shows that even in an atmosphere of suspicion and control, there were possibilities for those who were brave enough and convinced of their rightness. You sit after Brother Tommaso's departure and think, an inquisitor in the city is serious but not a catastrophe.
You're not doing anything forbidden.
You don't promise to create gold, don't present yourself as a miracle worker, don't deceive patrons. Your work is honest, practical, useful, but perhaps it's worth temporarily postponing experiments with more controversial texts, not discussing ideas about life extension publicly, keeping the most mysterious manuscripts hidden. You need to survive this period, as many before you survived. Knowledge is patient, it can wait until danger passes. And danger always passes, inquisitors leave, attention switches to other matters, and work continues. So it was for centuries, so it will be forward, because human curiosity is indestructible, and the desire to understand the world is stronger than any prohibitions. After midday, a servant of one of the rich merchants comes to you. His master has been ill for several days, and the house physician cannot relieve the condition. You're asked to come and see whether you can help with your alchemical remedies. You take a leather bag in which you always carry basic medicines, several vials with tinctures, bottles with powders, jars with salves, and go to the sick person's house. Medical alchemy is the most important part of your work, the area where alchemy truly brings real, measurable benefit to people. Here, legends about the Philosopher's Stone aren't needed. Here, concrete results matter. Pain relief, fever reduction, wound healing, strength restoration. The merchant's house is large, richly furnished. You're led to a bedroom on the second floor. The sick man lies in bed, pale with moist forehead. Nearby sits a physician, an elderly man in a dark mantle with a book in his hands. He nods to you grimly. Physicians and alchemists sometimes compete, but more often cooperate. Each has his own methods, his own knowledge. You ask about symptoms. The sick man complains of severe weakness, loss of appetite, stomach pains, slight fever. The physician already tried bloodletting, a standard treatment method in medieval medicine, based on the theory that illness is caused by excess of one of the body's 4 fluids. But no improvement came. You examine the sick man, ask questions about what he ate the last days, where he was, whether he contacted other sick people. Gradually, a picture forms. Probably this is digestive disorder, possibly caused by spoiled food or bad water. The fever is mild, which is good, meaning this isn't one of the severe fevers that mow people down indiscriminately. You take from the bag a small vial with dark liquid. This is a tincture of wormwood and mint in alcohol, a remedy you prepare regularly. Wormwood possesses bitterness that stimulates digestion and kills intestinal parasites.
Mint calms the stomach, relieves nausea.
Alcohol serves as solvent and preservative, and also itself has disinfecting properties. You give the sick man 20 drops of tincture in a small amount of water. Then you take out another vial. This is a decoction of chamomile and ginger that should be drunk 3 times a day. Chamomile relieves inflammation, ginger warms, improves circulation, helps the organism fight infection. You also advise the sick man to abstain from heavy food for several days, only light broth, bread, diluted wine. The organism must recover, and for this it doesn't need to be burdened with digesting fatty meat or spicy dishes. The physician listens, nods. Your advice is reasonable and doesn't contradict his own notions about medicine. Imagine how 15th century medicine differs from what will be known centuries later. Physicians don't know about the existence of microbes, bacteria, viruses. They don't understand how circulation works, how internal organs function. Their ideas are based on the ancient theory of 4 humours, body fluids. It's believed that in a person's body there are blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is balance of these fluids. Illness is imbalance. Too much blood, bloodletting is needed. Too much phlegm, warming remedies are needed. Too much bile, cooling and calming medicines are needed. This theory isn't quite correct from the standpoint of modern science, but it gave physicians a system, a way to think about diseases and treatment. Alchemists add to this their knowledge about properties of substances. You know that some herbs truly help with certain symptoms, not because they balance humours, but because they contain active substances that affect the organism. You cannot isolate these substances in pure form, don't know their chemical structure, but the experience of generations has shown they work. Willow bark relieves pain and fever. It contains a substance later called salicylic acid, aspirin's predecessor. Foxglove helps with heart diseases. It contains glycosides that regulate heart rhythm, but in large doses it's poison. Opium from poppy relieves severe pain and induces sleep. It contains morphine, a powerful painkiller, but causing addiction. Cinchona bark helps with some fevers. It contains quinine, which fights malaria. Imagine the complexity of an alchemist medic's work. You need to know not only which plants help, but how to properly prepare them. The same plant can act differently depending on how it was processed. Fresh leaves, dried leaves, decoction, tincture in alcohol, powder. All these are different medicines with different strength of action. You need to know dosages. Too little and medicine won't help. Too much and it can harm or even kill. Many medicinal plants are poisonous in large quantities. You need to know combinations, which herbs strengthen each other's action, which, conversely, neutralize. You need to understand individual characteristics of patients. Elderly and children need smaller doses. Some herbs are contraindicated for pregnant women. People with different diseases require different approaches. And here's what's striking. Despite all knowledge limitations, medieval medicine sometimes achieved amazing successes. Surgeons knew how to perform complex operations, remove cataracts from eyes, set bones, amputate limbs. Midwives helped women give birth using accumulated experience. Apothecaries prepared complex medicines that truly helped. And alchemists contributed, developing new preparations, perfecting methods of extracting active substances from plants, experimenting with mineral medicines. Mineral medicines are a separate and controversial area. Traditional medicine was based on plant and animal preparations, but alchemists began using minerals and metals. Mercury preparations were applied for treating skin diseases and, later, syphilis, a new terrible disease that appeared in Europe at the end of the previous century. Mercury truly killed the disease agent but was toxic, and treatment often crippled patients. Antimony preparations were used as emetics. It was believed that vomiting purifies the organism from excess, harmful fluids. Arsenic preparations were applied externally for treating skin problems, but this was dangerous poison requiring extreme caution. Gold in tiny doses was added to some medicines. It was believed that the most perfect metal can transmit its perfection to the organism. There was no scientific basis for this, but psychological effect could be significant. You leave the merchant's house with a promise to return in 2 days to check the condition. Experience suggests the patient will get better, his ailment isn't severe, and your medicines should help. But even if they don't help, the organism will cope on its own over time, provided rest and proper nutrition. Much in medicine depends not only on medicines, but on the organism's ability to heal itself. Medicines help, support, ease symptoms, but true healing comes from within. You understand this, though you cannot explain the mechanism. Returning to the laboratory, you think about how much still remains to be learned. Why do some people recover while others die from the same disease? Why do some medicines work on some patients but not work on others? What happens inside the body when a person is ill? These questions occupy your mind constantly. Perhaps someday humanity will find answers. Perhaps new instruments will appear, allowing a look inside the body, understanding processes now hidden. Perhaps new medicines will be found, more powerful and safer. You won't see this future, but your work is a small brick in the foundation on which future centuries' medicine will be built. Each recipe you record, each observation about medicine's action, each successful treatment case, all this is contribution to the treasury of human knowledge passed from generation to generation, slowly but steadily growing. Evening again descends on Florence, and you light candles in the laboratory. This is the end of a long day filled with work, distillations, preparing medicines, visits to patients, craftsman consultations. But now, in the silence of approaching night, you have time for reflections on broader questions.
You think about what alchemy truly is.
This isn't simply a set of recipes and processes. It's a way of thinking, an approach to the world that connects practice with philosophy, craft with seeking deep truths. And you wonder what will remain of alchemy when you're gone, when centuries pass. Will this knowledge disappear, as so much knowledge of the past disappeared, or will it transform into something new? You look at the instruments around, the athanor with its constant heat, the alembic with curved tubes, glass retorts and flasks, scales for precise weighing, mortars for grinding. All this was created by alchemists over centuries. Before alchemy, there was no developed laboratory practice. Ancient philosophers reflected on the nature of things but rarely conducted systematic experiments.
Alchemists changed this.
They created instruments, developed methods, established the importance of precise measurement and recording results. They showed that nature can be studied not only by reflection, but by action, not only by theory, but by practice. This is a fundamental contribution that will outlive any erroneous theories about metal transformation. Imagine what alchemy opened to humanity: distillation, a method of separating liquids that led to obtaining pure alcohol, essential oils, acids. Without distillation, there wouldn't be many medicines, perfumes, solvents that became part of everyday life. Acids, sulfuric, nitric, hydrochloric, aqua regia, powerful reagents that opened possibilities for metallurgy, fabric dyeing, metal purification, and in the future will become the basis of chemical industry. Alchemists substances opposite to acids necessary for producing soap, glass, paper, salts of various metals used as medicines, dyes, preservatives, methods of purifying substances, removing impurities, obtaining pure forms of metals and minerals, which is critically important for any technology. Alchemists also discovered or perfected many specific substances. Phosphorus, a glowing element that will be discovered by an alchemist trying to obtain gold from urine.
Zinc, a metal that alchemists learn to extract from ores.
Antimony, bismuth, arsenic, elements studied and described by alchemists. Many alloys, combinations of metals with new properties, stronger, more beautiful, more suitable for specific purposes. Pigments and dyes, from ultramarine to Prussian blue, from cinnabar to cobalt blue. All this is the result of alchemical work with minerals and metals. But perhaps alchemy's most important legacy is the method. Alchemists establish principles of experimental approach, observe phenomenon, formulate hypothesis about how it works, conduct experiment to test hypothesis, record results accurately and honestly. If results don't match expectations, revise hypothesis and try again. Repeat experiment to ensure result isn't accidental. This is the foundation of scientific method that in future centuries will become standard for all sciences. Of course, alchemists didn't always follow this method perfectly. Sometimes they let theory and symbolism overshadow observations, sometimes took wishful thinking for reality. But the direction was set. Imagine how alchemy will transform in the future. In the 17th century, figures like Robert Boyle will appear, who will begin systematically studying properties of gases, define the concept of chemical element as a substance that cannot be decomposed into simpler ones. In the 18th century, Antoine Lavoisier will conduct precise measurements of substance weight before and after reactions, establish the law of conservation of mass, create the first modern chemical nomenclature. Alchemical terms, philosophical mercury, red lion, green dragon, will be replaced with precise names of substances based on their composition. Mystical symbols will yield to chemical formulas. The search for the philosopher's stone will be recognized as an impossible dream based on wrong understanding of elements' nature. But all this will be development, continuation of what alchemists began. And here's what's striking. Some alchemical ideas that seemed fantastic will turn out not so far from truth. The idea that all substances consist of simpler components will lead to discovery of atoms and molecules. The idea about transforming one element into another, which seemed impossible and was the basis of searching for the philosopher's stone, will become reality in the 20th century with discovery of radioactivity and nuclear reactions. Lead indeed can turn into gold in a nuclear reactor, though this is economically senseless and not at all what alchemists imagined. The idea about quintessence, pure form of substance, resonates with modern methods of purification and isolating pure compounds. Alchemists were wrong in details, but they were right in the main thing. Matter is complex. It can be studied, understood, and changed. You think about all those alchemists who lived before you, passed knowledge from generation to generation, about your teacher who many years ago took you as apprentice and patiently taught the craft's wisdom, about those whose names are forgotten but whose discoveries are preserved in recipes and methods, about famous masters Jabir, Al-Razi, Avicenna, Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, whose works you read. All were links of one chain transmitting the torch of knowledge through centuries.
And you're also a link in this chain.
Something you learned from predecessors, something you discovered yourself. And all this you'll pass forward through records, through teaching students if you have them, through medicines and methods that will be used by others. Does the philosopher's stone exist? You don't know. Years of work haven't led you to it, but maybe you simply haven't approached close enough. Maybe another generation is needed, another 100 years of experiments. Or perhaps the philosopher's stone is a metaphor, symbol of perfect knowledge one can infinitely approach but never fully reach. Does the elixir of immortality exist? You know all people die, but you also know that good nutrition, clean water, physical activity, right medicines can extend life and improve its quality. Perhaps this is the real elixir, not a magical liquid granting eternal life, but a totality of knowledge about how to care for body and spirit. Does panacea exist, a universal medicine? Probably not. Each disease requires its approach, its treatment. But striving to find more effective medicines helping with many ailments is a worthy goal driving medical progress. Candles burn down, wax flows, the laboratory grows darker. Somewhere below on Florence's streets, night watch passes. Footsteps of guards are heard, a shout, then silence again. The city sleeps, but within its walls, in laboratories, workshops, scriptoria, the work of thought doesn't cease, work of hands, work creating the future. You extinguish the last candle and lie down on the narrow bed in the laboratory corner. Tomorrow will be a new day, new experiments, new questions. An alchemist's work never ends because the world is infinitely complex and full of mysteries, and each answer births new riddles. But this is the beauty in constant movement, in eternal search, in striving to understand and improve, in faith that human mind is capable of comprehending nature's laws and using them for good. You fall asleep to the quiet bubbling of liquid in a retort standing on the Athanor, to the faint smell of herbs and minerals, to the sounds of sleeping city. And in sleep you dream of the future, laboratories with incredible instruments capable of seeing atoms, books filled with knowledge you can only dream of, medicines healing diseases now considered incurable, a world where science and knowledge are valued above gold. Perhaps this is just a dream, fantasy of a tired mind. Or perhaps this is a vision of what will surely come when countless generations of scientists, each with their small contribution, will build the edifice of knowledge whose foundation you help lay today. Alchemy won't die, it will transform, purify from errors, preserve truth, and become the science of the future that will change the world.